The CEO waited alone every Christmas, until a single mom and her daughter knocked on his door with, "Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The wind howled through the empty streets of Connecticut as snow fell in soft, relentless sheets. Inside a vast modern mansion at the end of Willow Creek Drive, every light was on, yet the house felt hollow. Ethan Ward, founder and chief executive officer of Ward Biotech, sat alone beside a flickering fireplace, a half-full glass of whiskey untouched on the table. It was Christmas Eve, the fifth one he had spent without his family. A portrait on the mantel showed a smiling woman and a small boy holding a wooden train. Ethan's eyes lingered on it, his hand trembling as he set the glass down. The silence around him was heavy, broken only by the faint ticking of an antique clock. For years he had buried himself in work, in board meetings and research projects, pretending that time could heal the ache that lived in his chest. But every December 24th, the ghosts returned. Outside, the storm thickened. Snow piled against the wide windows, blurring the world beyond. Ethan glanced toward the front door, as if expecting someone to appear, though no one ever did. He whispered to himself, 5 years, and still no peace. The sound of his own voice startled him. Then, suddenly, 3 knocks echoed through the hall. Firm, hesitant, real. Ethan froze, his breath catching. He looked again, thinking it must be the wind. But the knocks came once more, 3 slow, deliberate raps that carried through the quiet house. He rose, shoulders tense, and walked toward the door. The security lights outside flickered on, revealing 2 small shapes on the porch. When he opened the door, cold air rushed in, sharp as a blade. Standing there was a woman wrapped in a threadbare coat, her hair damp with snow. Beside her, a little girl clung to a steaming container wrapped in a towel. "I am sorry to bother you," the woman said softly, her breath visible in the freezing air. "Our power went out, the heater stopped working, and my daughter has a bad cold. We just needed somewhere warm for a while." Ethan hesitated. The logical part of his mind urged him to say, no. He was a stranger to them, and they were strangers to him. Yet something about the child's flushed cheeks and the woman's trembling hands disarmed him. The little girl lifted the towel slightly, revealing the container. "We brought soup," she said in a small voice. "Mom made it before the power went out. It is chicken noodle." The warmth in that simple offering broke something inside Ethan. He stepped aside without another word. "Come in," he said quietly, "before you both freeze." As they crossed the threshold, the smell of homemade soup filled the air, cutting through the sterile scent of the house. The little girl's boots left small wet prints on the marble floor. The woman's name, he would soon learn, was Lena. Her daughter was Mia. Ethan led them to the fireplace and adjusted the flames higher. "Sit," he said, his voice steady but low. "You can stay until the storm passes." Lena nodded gratefully. "Thank you, sir. We did not mean to intrude. The storm came faster than we expected." She handed him the container. "It is still warm. Please, take some." He looked down at the container, the rising steam fogging his glasses. No one had cooked for him in 5 years. No one had said, "thank you," in even longer. He took the container carefully, almost reverently, as though it were something fragile. "Chicken noodle, huh?" he murmured. The girl nodded, eyes wide and curious. "Mom says soup helps people feel better," she said. Ethan managed a faint smile. "Your mom is right." For the first time in years, the sound of laughter, soft, hesitant, but real, filled the room. Snow continued to fall outside, wrapping the world in white silence. Inside, 3 strangers shared a quiet moment around the fire, unaware that this accidental meeting would change all of their lives forever. And so, on a night that began in emptiness, the man who thought he had lost everything opened his door to the warmth he never knew he still needed. The storm grew worse through the night. Snow pressed hard against the windows, and the wind moaned through the tall pines outside. Inside, the fire burned steady, throwing warm light across the living room walls. Ethan stood by the window, hands deep in his pockets, watching the snow swirl like ghosts across the dark yard. Behind him, the soft clatter of dishes broke the silence. Lena was in the kitchen, rinsing out the small soup container. Her movements were careful, almost apologetic, as if afraid to take up too much space. Her daughter Mia sat near the fire, wrapped in a thick blanket Ethan had brought from the guest room. She hummed to herself and drew shapes in the fogged window glass. "You can stay in the guest room upstairs," Ethan said finally. "It will be warmer than down here." Lena turned, a little startled by his voice. "You have already done enough. We do not want to trouble you." "It is no trouble," he replied quietly. "The roads will not clear until morning. It is safer if you stay." Lena hesitated, then nodded. She looked exhausted, her cheeks pale under the firelight. She had the calm strength of someone used to doing everything alone. "Thank you, Mr. Ward." He froze for a second. Hardly anyone called him that outside the office anymore. "Ethan," he said after a moment. "Please, just Ethan." Mia peeked over from her blanket. "Do you live here all by yourself?" Her question landed heavier than she knew. Ethan gave a faint smile. "Yes. Just me." "Oh, do you not get lonely?" she asked softly. Lena started to hush her, but Ethan raised a hand. "It is all right," he said. He looked back toward the fire. "Sometimes, yes." For a while, they sat in silence. The sound of the storm outside grew distant, muffled by the walls and the gentle crackle of burning wood. Then Lena spoke, her voice low and steady. "I used to be a nurse," she said, "at St. Joseph's Hospital downtown. They cut the staff last month, so I've been picking up home visits when I can. We moved here to start over." Ethan turned slightly, surprised by the familiarity of the hospital's name. "St. Joseph's?" "Yes," she said. "I worked mostly in the recovery ward. Long nights, long stories." She gave a small, tired laugh. "But at least it felt like I was helping someone." Something softened in his eyes. "You still are," he said. "You took care of your daughter. You helped me tonight more than you realize." She looked at him, uncertain what he meant, and he quickly turned back toward the fire. Mia's small voice filled the pause. "Mom says when people help others, good things find them back." Ethan nodded slowly. "Your mom sounds wise." "She is," Mia said proudly, before yawning and curling tighter into the blanket. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing soft and even. Lena lowered her voice. "She has had a cold for days. The clinic gave us medicine, but the power went out before I could warm her up. Thank you for letting us in." "You do not have to thank me," Ethan said. He poured her a cup of hot tea from the kettle that had been sitting near the fire. "You said you moved here to start over. That takes courage." She accepted the cup, fingers brushing his for just a second. "Sometimes courage feels a lot like desperation," she said with a half-smile. Ethan understood that too well. He watched her sip the tea, steam curling around her face. For the first time in years, the house felt alive, filled not with echoes, but with breath and warmth. Hours passed. The fire burned lower, and the storm outside began to quiet. Lena dozed off in the armchair beside her daughter, her hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder. Ethan stood nearby, studying them, the faint rise and fall of their breathing. The sight struck him harder than he expected. He had forgotten what peace looked like. He turned toward the window again. Snowflakes drifted under the porch light, catching in the dark like falling stars. Somewhere inside him, something small and quiet shifted a feeling he had not allowed in years. Not happiness yet, but the beginning of something close. When dawn came, the storm had passed. A pale golden light touched the horizon, and the trees glittered under a thin coat of ice. Ethan brewed coffee in the kitchen, its scent filling the room. Lena woke first, blinking at the unfamiliar space. Then she saw him standing there, holding out a mug. "Good morning," he said softly. "Looks like the roads are open again." She smiled faintly, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "We will be out of your way soon. I cannot thank you enough for last night." Ethan shook his head. "There is no debt, just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Just promise me you will drive carefully. The roads can be unpredictable after a storm." She nodded. "I will." As she turned to wake Mia, Ethan's gaze fell again on the empty fireplace. The warmth from last night lingered, both in the air and somewhere deeper. He did not know it yet, but the woman and the child who stepped through his door had already begun to heal the part of him that had long forgotten how to feel. The following morning, the sky above Willow Creek was a clear, delicate blue. The storm had passed, leaving everything wrapped in a thin sheet of white. The driveway glittered with frost, and the sound of melting snow dripped gently from the roof. Ethan stood on the porch, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, watching Lena and Mia pack their old sedan. Lena turned to him, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Thank you again, Ethan. I do not know what we would have done without your help." "You would have managed," he said quietly, though his eyes lingered on the little girl as she climbed into the back seat. "You seem to have a way of surviving." Lena smiled faintly. "We try." She paused. "If you ever need anything, the clinic downtown is always open. I help there sometimes." He nodded, unsure how to respond. "Drive safely." The car pulled away slowly, tires crunching on the icy road. For a long moment, Ethan stood in the cold, watching the small red taillights fade into the pale distance. When the silence returned, the house behind him felt heavier than before. Days turned into weeks. The new year came quietly, with snow melting from the roofs and thin sunlight spilling through the wide glass windows of his study. Ethan returned to his routine calls, research reports, meetings that ran past midnight. The loneliness, which had seemed to lift for a moment, crept back like a shadow he could not escape. Then one evening, while driving back from a meeting at the Ward Biotech Research Center, Ethan noticed the small clinic Lena had mentioned. Its sign flickered weakly in the cold dusk light. St. Joseph's Community Health Center. For reasons he could not explain, he slowed his car. Through the frosted window, he could see Lena wearing her pale blue uniform, kneeling beside an elderly man in a wheelchair. Her movements were gentle, steady, patient, the same quiet grace she had shown that night at his house. Something stirred in him. He parked and walked in, pretending to look for a medical form. Lena looked up, surprise crossing her face. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "I thought I should check if your heater works," he said lightly, almost smiling. She laughed softly. "It works. But you can still donate one if you want. Half of them are older than me." The clinic was small, clean, but clearly underfunded. The waiting chairs were mismatched, and the walls carried children's drawings taped beside public health posters. On a bulletin board, a crayon drawing caught Ethan's eye. It was unmistakably Mia's work, a house glowing with yellow windows under falling snow. At the bottom, in large uneven letters, it said, "A warm home is the best medicine." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "Mia drew this?" Lena nodded proudly. "Yes, she says it reminds her of your house." He did not know what to say. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I noticed your clinic could use some new equipment," he said. "This is a donation from Ward Biotech's community fund. You do not have to thank me. Just make sure it helps people." "Oh." Lena looked at the envelope, then back at him. "You did not have to do this." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." Their eyes met for a moment long enough for the air between them to shift. It was not romance yet, but something beginning to root itself in silence and gratitude. That night, when he returned home, Ethan placed the same envelope copy in his office file marked Project Light Again. It was a small initiative he had once dreamed of creating with his late wife medical support for underfunded clinics. He had abandoned it after the accident. Until now, he sat at his desk, staring at the paper. The echo of Mia's voice lingered in his mind. "Mom says soup helps people feel better." The words played again and again, soft but persistent, like a heartbeat. For the first time in years, he felt something like purpose flicker back to life. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself visiting the clinic more often. Sometimes he brought supplies, sometimes just coffee for the staff. Mia would run to greet him with her small drawings, her laughter filling the room like sunlight. Lena always tried to hide her smile, but he saw it each time. Without realizing it, Ethan had begun to return to the world not as the untouchable chief executive officer, but as a man relearning how to care. The seed had been planted, quietly and deeply, and though he could not yet name it, It was already growing inside the space where loneliness used to live. The weeks that followed turned into a quiet routine that neither of them planned, but both came to depend on. Every Thursday evening, Ethan stopped by St. Joseph's Community Health Center with coffee, fresh fruit, or small donations of medical supplies. Lena always greeted him with a tired smile, sometimes teasing him that he was spoiling the staff. Mia would rush toward him, arms full of crayons and papers, eager to show her newest masterpiece. Outside, winter slowly melted into spring. The trees along Willow Creek shed their frost, and pale sunlight spilled through the clinic's front windows. The place began to look brighter, not only because of the new equipment Ethan had funded, but also because of the hope that quietly returned to those who worked there. One evening, Lena finished her shift late. The other nurses had already gone home, and she was closing the last patient file when she noticed Ethan standing by the door. He looked different, more relaxed, almost boyish, despite the gray at his temples. "You should not wait for me," she said softly, slipping her coat on. "I was in the area," he replied. "Or at least that is what I am telling myself." She smiled, shaking her head. "You do not have to check on us every week." "I am not checking," he said. "I am learning." Learning what?" "How to be around people again." The simplicity of his words caught her off guard. They walked out together into the cool night. The parking lot was quiet, washed in the soft orange glow of the streetlights. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Lena said, "You know, you never told me what made you build Ward Biotech. You are not the type who does it just for money." Ethan's eyes followed the steam rising from his breath. "My wife was a scientist," he said slowly. "She believed that medicine was not just about curing illness, but about restoring dignity. After she passed away, I kept the company alive because I thought she would have wanted that. But over time, I lost track of why." Lena's expression softened. "You did not lose it. You just buried it for a while." He looked at her, the streetlight reflecting in his eyes. "Maybe you are right." They stopped near her car. From the back seat, Mia's small voice piped up. "Mom, are we going home now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Lena said. "Say goodbye to Mr. Ethan." "Goodbye, Mr. Ethan," Mia said through a sleepy yawn. "Do not forget to smile tomorrow." Ethan laughed quietly. "I will try." Lena watched him as she started the car. "She likes you, you know." "I like her too," he said simply. For a moment, neither moved. The faint sound of traffic from the main road hummed in the distance, and the night air smelled of thawing earth. Lena finally said, "Ethan, you are allowed to start over. Whatever happened before, it does not have to be the end of your story." He nodded, though his eyes clouded. "Maybe, but some stories take longer to rewrite." When she drove away, Ethan remained standing under the dim light, hands in his pockets, the faint echo of her words lingering in his mind. He felt lighter somehow, as if a door long sealed had quietly opened. Later that night, back in his office, he stared at the folder labeled Project Light again. On the desk sat Mia's newest drawing, a bright sun shining over a small clinic. Beneath it, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "You can help people smile again." Ethan closed his eyes and let out a deep breath. The thought that used to hurt now felt almost like healing. Somewhere between late-night coffee and children's drawings, he had found a piece of himself he thought was gone forever. Spring turned into early summer, and life around Willow Creek began to bloom again. Flowers lined the streets, the air smelled of rain and fresh grass, and the world felt softer than it had in years. Ethan's visits to the clinic had become something of a ritual every week. The same warm smile from Lena, the same joyful wave from Mia. It had started as a way to help, but now he found excuses to stop by even when there was no donation to make. One afternoon, Ethan arrived at the clinic carrying boxes of new medical monitors. The staff greeted him with genuine warmth, but he noticed Lena was quieter than usual. She was reviewing files in the back office, her expression tense. "Everything all right?" he asked gently. She hesitated before answering. "I have been reading something about you," she said at last. "There is a report online. It says the medication your company produced years ago caused a patient's death, that it was covered up." Ethan's face went pale. "You read that?" "I did. Is it true?" He drew in a slow breath, the weight of memory pressing against his chest. "There was a clinical trial 5 years ago. My wife was part of the research team. A side effect appeared in one patient. It was tragic, but we reported everything to the board. After the accident that took my wife and son, the company leadership changed. They decided to keep the reports quiet, said it would damage investor trust. I walked away. Lena's eyes widened. So you did not hide it? I fought to release it, he said. But they buried the data under new projects. I never forgave myself for not stopping them. She lowered her gaze, torn between compassion and confusion. People think you disappeared to protect yourself. I disappeared because I could not bear to see her name on every article, he said quietly, because every headline made me feel like I killed them twice. The silence between them was heavy. Lena looked away, gripping the edge of her desk. Ethan, I want to believe you, but it is hard to know what is real anymore. You are kind, and you help us, but I need to know who you really are. He stepped back, nodding slowly. Then ask me anything, but do not stop believing in the person I am trying to be. She shook her head, tears rising in her eyes. I need time. He wanted to reach for her, to explain more, but the pain in her voice stopped him. Take all the time you need, he said softly. That evening, Lena left early. Mia waved goodbye from the clinic door, her smile bright but confused by the sadness she sensed in the adults. Ethan watched them disappear down the street, the light fading around them. For the first time in months, he felt the old emptiness return. When he got home, he sat alone in his study, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the wall clock. On his desk lay the folder for Project Light again, the one he had been building quietly for months. He stared at it for a long moment, then closed it. The following week, the media storm hit. Articles surfaced accusing Ethan of resurfacing only to rebrand his image. They painted him as a man seeking redemption through charity, not truth. His board of directors called an emergency meeting, demanding explanations. In a single day, everything he had rebuilt began to crumble. His silence became the world's evidence of guilt. The people at the clinic stopped calling. Even Lena's phone went unanswered. Ethan stood before the tall windows of his office, watching the city lights blur in the distance. Somewhere inside, the warmth that had returned started to fade again. But he remembered Mia's words, "Do not forget to smile tomorrow." He whispered to himself, "Not yet," because deep down, he knew the truth had not been buried forever. And even in the darkest corner of his guilt, he still believed that kindness, no matter how small, had the power to bring light back again. Days passed with no word from Lena. The silence stretched longer than Ethan could bear. He spent his mornings buried in meetings, and his nights pacing through the empty halls of his house. The media continued to circle, digging through every file, every headline from the past. Ward Biotech's stock wavered. Investors demanded statements. His own employees avoided eye contact in the lobby. Then one afternoon, a news alert flashed across his phone. The headline read, "Whistleblower claims new evidence in Ward Biotech trial scandal." The article quoted an anonymous source who claimed the company had falsified safety data years ago. Ethan's name appeared again and again, twisted by speculation. He called his legal team, but the answer was always the same: no proof, no witness, no way to fight what was spreading. Still, something about the tone of the article unsettled him. The details were too specific, too fresh. He suspected only someone from inside could have leaked them. That evening, his suspicion was confirmed when his assistant slipped him a message. "Nathan Hale has been seen meeting with reporters," she said quietly. "He is the one feeding the story." Nathan Hale, his former deputy, now vice president of operations, had once been his closest ally. After Ethan stepped back from the company years ago, Nathan rose quickly, ambitious and hungry for power. Ethan had trusted him, but now it was clear Nathan was behind the lies. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "He is trying to take control," he said. "He wants me gone for good." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, the board is already scheduling a vote to remove you as acting chairman." Ethan's hand clenched around the armrest. "Let them vote," he said quietly, "but not before I bring out the truth." That night, he sat at his desk and reopened the folder labeled Project Light again. Inside were copies of reports from the original trial data his late wife had stored on a secure drive. He had kept them hidden for years, unsure if revealing them would do more harm than good. But now, they were the only chance to clear her name and his. He began contacting the few researchers who had worked with her. Some refused to speak, afraid of retaliation. Others simply hung up. By midnight, exhaustion blurred his thoughts. He ran his hand through his hair, whispering, "There has to be someone left who remembers." Meanwhile, across town, Lena was sitting in her small apartment, scrolling through the same articles. The headlines were relentless, the comments cruel. Yet something in her heart refused to believe the man she had come to know was capable of deceit. She remembered the grief in his voice when he spoke about his wife, the sincerity in his eyes when he handed her that envelope for the clinic. She opened her old nursing files and found a name, Dr. Harris. He had once supervised the trials connected to Ward Biotech. If anyone knew the truth, it would be him. Without telling anyone, she arranged to meet him at the hospital the next morning. When she arrived, the doctor looked surprised to see her. "Lena, I remember you from St. Joseph's. What brings you here?" She hesitated. "I need to know what really happened with the Ward Biotech case. Was Ethan Ward responsible?" Dr. Harris sighed, his expression heavy. "No. Quite the opposite. He tried to stop it. The data manipulation was ordered by the board. Nathan Hale approved every false report. Ethan's wife had found out and was preparing to expose it before the accident." Lena's pulse quickened. "Are you willing to testify?" He nodded slowly. "If the truth still matters, yes." By the time Lena left the hospital, the evening sun was sinking low behind the city skyline. She knew what she had to do. Ethan had been fighting a battle alone, and it was time someone stood beside him. That night, as Ethan sat alone staring at the frozen reflection of his own company's logo outside his window, a soft knock echoed through his door. When he opened it, Lena stood there, breathless from the cold, eyes filled with determination. "I know who did this," she said, "and I am going to help you prove it." For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt the weight on his chest ease. "Then let us begin," he whispered. Ethan stared at Lena, disbelief flickering in his tired eyes. "You know who did it?" he asked, his voice rough. "Yes," she said firmly. "Dr. Harris confirmed everything. Nathan Hale ordered the data to be falsified. Ethan, you were never the one to blame." For a moment, the words did not seem real. Then Ethan drew in a slow breath, a spark of hope breaking through the fog that had surrounded him for years. "If Dr. Harris is willing to testify, this could clear everything." Lena nodded. He already agreed. "But you cannot face the board alone. Let me help you prepare." They spent the night gathering every file, every message, every signed report his late wife had kept. The work was relentless, but Lena's calm steadiness kept him grounded. Whenever fatigue started to drag him down, she reminded him softly, "You are not doing this for revenge. You are doing this for the truth." By morning, the city was awake, and the hearing was set at the corporate headquarters. Cameras lined the street outside, journalists pressing forward for statements. Ethan arrived with Lena and Dr. Harris by his side. For the first time in years, he walked into the building not as a man haunted by guilt, but as someone ready to fight. Inside the boardroom, Nathan Hale was already waiting, a confident smirk on his face. "Ethan," he said smoothly, "I wish this reunion were under better circumstances." Ethan met his gaze without flinching. "So do I. Especially since this might be your last day here." The tension in the room was sharp enough to cut. Nathan leaned back, pretending amusement. Big words for a man who abandoned his company. Lena stepped forward, her voice clear. "He did not abandon it. He refused to lie for it." The board members turned as Dr. Harris placed a thick folder of evidence on the table. "This is the original data from the trial," the doctor said. "It proves that the drug's side effects were hidden under Nathan Hale's supervision." Ethan Ward tried to release the information, but the board overruled him. A murmur swept through the room. Nathan's face stiffened. "This is absurd," he barked. Ethan stood quietly, letting the truth speak for itself. "For years I carried the guilt that belonged to others," he said, "but I will not carry their lies any longer." The chairman of the board rose. "Mr. Hale, we will conduct a full investigation. You are suspended effective immediately." Nathan's composure cracked. "You cannot do this." "Yes, they can," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "Because this time, there are witnesses." Security escorted Nathan from the room as reporters pressed closer to the glass doors. For the first time, the headlines would tell the truth. When the meeting ended, Lena and Ethan stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. Cameras flashed, but Ethan ignored them. He turned to her and said quietly, "You could have walked away. Why did you come back?" Lena smiled, her eyes warm. "Because I knew you were not the man they said you were, and because the world needs people who believe in something good." For a long moment, Ethan simply looked at her, the corners of his mouth lifting into a quiet smile. The storm that had shadowed his life was finally breaking, and the first light of peace began to shine through. A year passed after the hearing, and everything changed. Ward Biotech rebuilt its reputation under Ethan's leadership, this time with full transparency and programs that honored his late wife's vision. The Project Light Again Foundation grew from an idea into a nationwide network of community clinics. Ethan refused to put his name on any of the buildings. Instead, every sign read the same phrase: "Hope belongs to everyone." It was Christmas Eve again, the first one in years that did not feel empty. The downtown convention hall glowed with lights and garlands for the foundation's annual gala. Guests filled the room, music played softly, and volunteers who had worked all year came together to celebrate. Backstage, Ethan stood by the curtain, straightening his tie. He was nervous, though not because of the crowd. He looked out over the rows of tables and saw familiar faces, doctors, nurses, and patients the program had helped. And there, near the front, sat Lena and Mia. Lena wore a deep green dress, simple but elegant, her hair falling over her shoulders. Mia sat beside her, now a little taller, her smile as bright as ever. In her hands, she held a framed drawing, one Ethan recognized instantly. It was the same picture from that first winter night, a house with glowing windows, snow falling outside, and the words, "A warm home is the best medicine." Ethan stepped onto the stage as the crowd quieted. "A year ago," he began, "I stood before you all uncertain of the future. I had lost faith in people, in purpose, even in myself. But two people reminded me that healing does not start in laboratories or boardrooms. It starts when someone knocks on your door and offers you a bowl of soup." Lena's eyes glistened, and Mia grinned proudly. The audience clapped softly, touched by the simplicity of his words. He continued, "Tonight, we dedicate our newest clinic in a name that means everything to me. It will be called the Lena and Mia Ward Health Center, because their kindness saved more than one life." "Oh." Lena covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Mia turned to her, whispering, "Mom, that is us." Ethan stepped down from the stage and crossed the room, holding something small in his hand. It was the old Christmas card Mia had given him that first night, laminated and perfectly preserved. On the back, he had written one sentence in careful ink: "Home found me again." He knelt in front of them, his voice trembling. "Lena, I cannot change the years I lost, but I can promise the rest of mine to making things right with you, and with her." The room fell silent. Then Mia's small voice broke through, soft but certain. "Say yes, Mom." Lena's tears turned into laughter. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times, yes." The crowd rose in applause as snow began to fall outside, glimmering through the tall windows. Ethan looked up, smiling through tears, knowing that the story that began with loneliness had become something far greater proof that even the coldest winter could bring warmth again. A year later, Christmas returned to Willow Creek. Snow covered the rooftops, the air smelled of pine and cinnamon, and laughter echoed from every corner of the house. The mansion that had once been silent now glowed with golden lights and soft music. Ethan stood by the fireplace, adjusting the star at the top of the Christmas tree. Behind him, Lena carried a tray of cookies, and Mia darted around with a garland, giggling. The home was full of warmth, of life, of everything he once thought he would never feel again. "Careful, Mia," Lena called, smiling. "You will knock the ornaments down." "I am helping, Daddy," Mia said proudly, stretching to hang the last decoration. The word Daddy still caught Ethan by surprise, and every time he heard it, it filled his chest with something deeper than happiness. He knelt to her level, holding a small glass ornament engraved with words that glimmered in the firelight. "Our first family Christmas." Together, they placed it on the tree. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and endless. Ethan walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street glowing under the lights. He thought of the night years ago when a knock on his door had changed everything. That night had given him back not just his purpose but his heart. Lena came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You look lost in thought," she whispered. "Just grateful," he said softly. "For both of you." Mia ran over, clutching a steaming cup of cocoa. "Come on, it is time for the movie," she said. Ethan turned off the lights except for the tree. The room glowed with the gentle sparkle of ornaments, casting reflections across their faces. As they settled onto the couch, Lena leaned her head against his shoulder, and Mia curled between them, yawning. The camera of the world would have seen only a family watching an old Christmas film. But to Ethan, it was everything: peace after chaos, love after loss, light after years of darkness. He looked toward the window one last time and smiled. "Sometimes," he whispered, "the miracle you wait for is simply someone who knocks." And as snow drifted down outside, the world finally felt whole again.